All right, welcome back, everybody. We are continuing on with our adventures in fantasy, and this particular lesson, we're going to be talking about magical objects with the author's purpose. So my title is going to be Fantasy Magical Objects with author's purpose. All right, so we've talked a lot in the past about author's purpose, and normally when we say author's purpose, you guys are automatically telling us, the pie, persuade, inform, entertain, which is great. That is exactly one of those things that we need to think about. But when you start taking your STAR testing, and as you start getting older, you're going to realize that we have author's purpose for specific objects or specific reasons why an author included something into their story, whether it be a specific character, a specific place, a specific object, and in this case, a specific magical object, in order to help the story tell the story. So we're going to go ahead and take our notebook and twist it around so that way I can make my nice, lovely chart. I know you guys are so excited about the chart, right? I know. All right, so I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to start over here. I always start at my red line. I go all the way down to my next red line because it makes it a nice, easy way for me to follow. Then go up to the red line so I know where to stop. There it is, all nice and neat. I'm going to make a very thin row at the top. And I'm going to put in the title, which is going to go in my first column. Then we're going to talk about the magical object / person. So we can have a magical object or we can have a magical person in our story. And then the last column, we're going to leave that kind of a little bit larger because we're going to have more to write there. We're going to say, why is it important to the story? Why is that important to the story? And now we have been talking about Westlandia. We've been talking about the Lorax. Today we're going to talk about probability, and that is our new story. So woohoo, we got something else to add on. And I forgot to add in, I want to make 3 rows here. There we go. All right, so the first story that we're going to talk about, our first title is Westlandia. And then when we're talking about Westlandia, I'm thinking back about the story. I know it's been a little while, but the magical object or the magical person, it was not a person, it was an object. It was those Westlandia seeds. Remember the ones that blew in on the west wind and landed and grew in his garden overnight? And then 4 weeks later, they were as tall as trees. Seeds don't grow that fast. So we have those Westlandia seeds. Now we have to stop and think, why were those seeds so important to the story? I mean, why did the author include seeds that are going to fly in on a west wind and grow in his garden? And as I'm starting to think about it, those seeds created an entire civilization. It was how Wesley was able to create his numbering system, his alphabet, how he made his new friends. So those seeds created the Westlandia plant. Plant then created all of Wesley's civilization. So we have that beautiful plant. Without that plant, he wouldn't have found the staple food crop. He wouldn't have been able to build a shelter. He wouldn't have even made his friends. So that plant, those seeds, gave us the plant, which gave us the whole story. That's why the author included it in there. All right, so that is the Westlandia. If you need to pause in order to catch up on that, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, we are moving right on to the next book, which would be the Lorax. Now, the Lorax is one of my favorite stories, and when I'm thinking about the Lorax, magical object or person, we didn't really have too many magical objects, but we did have one specific person, and that was, yep, you guessed it, the Lorax himself. Guy would crack me up. He was this little short dude, and he doesn't look like any other animal that we have in our world. But he was a magical person. If you remember at the very end of the story, he picked himself up and flew off. And last time I checked, you can't pick yourself up and you can't fly anywhere. So that's why I say he's the magical person. And why is he important to the story? So why is it important that the Lorax was included in the story called, the Lorax? Other than the fact that it's the name of the story. And if you think about it, the author included him because he used the Lorax to point out to the Onceler all of the things that he was doing that were hurting the environment around him. So he being the Lorax, was the one to point out to the Onceler that he is going back to the Onceler, was destroying the environment. Okay, so he was the one that was pointing out to the Onceler that he was destroying the environment. He was the one that was really kind of moving the story along and making sure that things were happening, and making sure that we understood too what happens if we don't take care of the environment. All right, last but not least, Probudiddy. I always just think that's a fun story. And if I'm thinking about Probudiddy, there's a lot of different magical objects in there. And the one magical object that was included in this that made them think everything was going crazy was the spinning disc. Remember that disc that he spun in order to hypnotize his sister. Now, this magical disc, even though we know what the end of the story is and that she wasn't actually hypnotized, we know that this spinning disc is the one that's magical and when I say magical, that means it really wasn't magical, but the boys thought it was magical because Trudy started acting like a dog after that. And they truly believed that they would use the spinning disc in order to hypnotize Trudy. So the magical disc is what makes Trudy believe she is a dog. Even though we know it's ended up not being true, because the boys believed it, that's why it's making this a fantasy story. That spinning disc, that magical disc, made her think that she was a dog. So they thought it was real. All right, so I am glad you guys were able to join me. Make sure that you are paying attention. Make sure that you have written down all of these different parts. The magical object, why is it important to the story? What was the author's purpose for including all of these pieces in the story? And be ready to discuss magical objects and magical people and fantasy stories in your next class.